Hey guys, welcome to today's video where I'm going to tell you what I consider to be the best bass fishing lure of all time.
Fish on! That's a toad, brother. Golly!
All right, so to quantify a statement like best bass fishing lure of all time, let me tell you the parameters, okay? It's a lure that's got to be easy to fish. It's got to be a lure that fishes well in multiple conditions. And it's got to be a lure that pretty much fishes anywhere in the country, any time of the year, shallow, deep, and everything in between, and catches fish. And so that lure is the Gary Yamamoto Senko. Now, I'm not just talking about a stick bait. I'm specifically talking about the Gary Yamamoto Senko because I have fished the Senko, the original Senko, the often imitated, never duplicated Senko, against a lot of stuff out there, and nothing ever is as good. Are there things that are close? Absolutely. They say imitation is the greatest form of flattery, and I believe that when it comes to stick baits, but nothing beats the original Senko. Now, I don't get real fancy with the Senko. I fish a green pumpkin with black flake like I'm holding here. I fish a black with blue flake, a solid black, and every now and then I mix it up with some goby or watermelon red, pumpkin, things like that. But by and large, I stick with the basics. The clearer the water, the more natural I go. The darker the water, the darker I go. But then when I say that, I catch them in the middle of the day with a bright sun and ultra clear water on a solid black Senko. So this thing just flat works. Now, I have caught the shallowest fish I've ever caught in my life on a Senko. I've also caught the deepest fish I've ever caught in my life on a Senko. So it just shows you how versatile it is. I caught a fish that was so shallow that I threw the lure on the bank and dragged it into the water, and I pretty much think that half of the bait was still on the bank when this fish hit it. So I'm going to call that less than 6 inches of water. Really is like an inch. But I also got frustrated drop shotting because I would rather pull my fingernails off with pliers than drop shot, and decided that I was going to drop shot a Senko in a wacky rig configuration and caught a fish in a little over 40 foot of water. Now, a lot of you guys are going to go, man, that ain't that deep. That's the deepest you ever caught a fish. Yeah, that's the deepest I've ever caught a fish, except for in salt water. But for bass fishing, once they go past 40 feet, they're probably pretty dang on safe from old Chad and most of you guys out there. So, again, I've caught fish on this thing, Texas rigged, wacky rigged, Ned rigged, Nico rigged, and everything in between. So that's why I consider this the best bass fishing bait of all time. And I'm going to further quantify that when I talk about this other bait that I'm holding in my hand, because you're probably saying, if you're calling that the best bait, why do we keep seeing you sticking this one up? All right. So one of the criteria for which you're going to declare a bait as the best of all times is how well pros do with it when it comes to winning money. Now, I can't tell you the statistics in Major League Fishing, in bass, in everything in between, but I can tell you this. In KBF competition, in kayak bass fishing competition, I've handed checks to hundreds of people. We've run over 1,000 live events. We've run 4 or 5, 6,000 virtual events. And I've talked to the winners of most of those events. And the recurring lure, the one that consistently has won more money, is the Yamamoto Senko. Now, I have to clarify that this is not the lure that has won the single most money in KBF competition. That honor is bestowed upon this dude right here. That is the Z-Man Jackhammer. This lure won $100,000 in one tournament when Dwayne Taft took home the title of Kayak Bass Fishing National Champion on Kentucky Lake in 2018. But here's what I'm going to say about that. The Jackhammer, deadly effective. Probably a close second in mentions when it comes to who's won money in KBF tournaments. The top 3 all time is a Jackhammer, a Senko, and a jig. Now, the Senko, if you take out that $100,000 payout, there's nothing even close, even the Jackhammer. The Senko has won hands down more money than any other lure out there. And why has it won more money? Well, because it's a versatile lure. Again, you can fish it shallow, you can fish it deep, you can fish it slow, you can fish it fast, but it just gets bit. In fact, my wife Christy is so in love with the Senko, she calls it her good butt jeans. I think I know what that means, and a lot of women out there are probably shaking their heads and smiling, and a bunch of dudes are probably shaking their head going, what? But it's a confidence lure, okay? I asked her early in the week, hey, sum up in one word why you love to fish the Senko so much. And she said, consistency. I was like, well, you know what that consistency comes from? She's like, what's that? I said, confidence, okay? You get that consistency because you have confidence. And the problem with this lure for some people is it is so effective it almost becomes a crutch. In fact, my good buddy Gene, the Fluke Master Jensen, he's going to get mad when I tell you this story, and a lot of you guys have probably heard it. I was laying the smackdown one time in Alabama, and I knew I was going to be catching them on a Senko, and I knew he didn't like fishing Senkos because he thought it was too easy, okay? And a lot of people don't like to fish a Senko, or they don't like to admit they fish a Senko because they think it's too easy. And he said, dude, give me a bag of those Senkos. I was like, check your PFD pocket. And he unzipped his PFD pocket, and I'd already put 2 bags in there for him. That's how effective this lure is. I had confidence that day in those conditions, under those circumstances, we could throw the kitchen sink at them and not catch them, but I could still catch them on a Senko. So this lure is not only my go-to lure, it's my go-to throwback lure. By and large, if you see a video and I'm fishing a power bait, I've usually got one of these dangling off the front of the boat just in the water, or swinging back and forth, or right behind me, because if I'm throwing a topwater and they miss it, if I'm throwing a crankbait and they miss it, I'm going to go back with a Senko. So here's why I consider this the best. Here's why I consider this the best bass fishing lure of all time. Okay, there are a ton of lures out there that are deadly effective, and that's why we all love this game. They're like our grown-up toys, okay? Fishing lures are literally, they're just grown-up toys, okay? And it's not fun to catch them the same way all the time, but if you've got to catch them for a video, or if you've got to catch them for a tournament, or if you've got to catch them to build your confidence, or if you're looking to validate whether or not there's fish in a particular fishery, this is the go-to bait. And so it's not only a go-to bait, it's a go-to throwback bait when something else, if they blow up on a frog and I miss it, I'm skipping a Senko back into the hole they made. You can't get more confident in a bait than a bait that you'll think that they'll take after they just missed another bait. So here's what I'm going to sum this video up with, and how I'm going to quantify my position that the Gary Yamamoto custom bait Senko is the best bass fishing lure ever. I don't care what lure you're fishing. You can be fishing crankbaits, you can be fishing spinner baits, you can be fishing bladed baits. While you're catching them on those things, you can also catch them on this. But the reverse isn't true. There's times you can only catch them on a Senko, but I've never found a time where I'm catching them on something else, and if I throw a Senko in there, they won't eat it as well. Now, I've never Alabama rigged a bunch of Senkos, but that's about the only thing I've not done. I've used a jig for a drop shot, and I call that the jig and twig. I've thrown it as a regular drop shot. You know, I've watched a ton of pros who don't admit they fish this thing, and then I've literally either been watching or I've interviewed some of the top anglers in the kayak bass fishing nation, kayak bass fishing tournament series across the country, and the common denominator, the lure that brings home more money than any lure out there, which means it catches more fish in more conditions than any lure out there, is the Gary Yamamoto custom baits Senko. So listen, if you've ever asked this question, if you've ever asked yourself this question, golly, what should I be throwing right now? If you don't know, throw a Senko. If you've ever asked yourself, man, I'm not sure if there's fish in this lake, and you want to go search and explore, throw a Senko. If you need to boost your confidence, build your confidence, reinforce your confidence, throw a Senko. You know, I'm not a big fan of Ned rigs because they're a do-nothing lure, but I'm becoming more and more a fan of them as I fish, you know, tough conditions. And the Senko, in a lot of cases, a lot of people aren't a fan of it because it's a do-nothing lure. You know why it's a do-nothing lure? Because it does the work for you. Now, when you fish it as a wacky rig, you got to impart some action on it. But by and large, they're not hitting it when you're jerking it. They're hitting it when you stop jerking it, and it does that death shimmer as it's falling. So tie one on, throw it out, let it fall, watch your line, and let the lure do the work. And I promise you, you'll put more bass in the boat next year. So if you're looking to gear up in the off season for that go-to lure that you're going to say so if you're looking to gear up in the off season with a lure that is going to put more fish in the boat next year, be sure to add a Gary Yamamoto custom baits, the original Yamasenko, the Senko, to your arsenal. I'll see y'all in the next video. Smash that thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so, or if it's your first time here. And y'all let me know in the comment section below if you agree or if you disagree. Come on, man. That ain't the best lure ever. How can you possibly say that, Chad?